In the dark recesses of history, there exists a legend that has haunted people's minds for centuries. One of the most famous and feared tales ever told. It is the legend of vampires, a story that has captivated imaginations for hundreds of years. Although vampires may seem alluring now, their history is darker and more terrifying than you might realize. And while you may think these creatures are entirely fictional, what if I told you they might actually exist? That they could be among us now, but not in the form we recognize. The vampire as we know it today is a pale, blood-drinking creature, emerging only at night, burned by sunlight, invisible in mirrors, warded off by Gallic, and sometimes transforms to a bat and killed by a wooden stake. This is the version Bram Stoker immortalized in Dracula, and it's an image that has stayed with us ever since. But the origins of the vampire go back much further, and their history is far more chilling. The concept of the vampire predates Dracula by over 1,000 years, originating in Eastern Europe, in places like Bulgaria. Back then, the vampire was a ghostly being, and it was believed to spread disease among the living. This fear of the undead spread across Europe, reaching England, and reached a fever pitch during the Middle Ages. Fear of vampires flourished in the Middle Ages with the spread of epidemics. People were afraid of death, and believed that corpses harmed the living, even after their death. It became common to examine corpses, looking for signs of turning into a vampire. These signs included anything they thought was suspicious, such as the lack of decomposition of corpses due to the cold weather. And because of the lack of medical awareness, people did not know the natural signs of decomposition. Sometimes, after death, the skin shrinks, making the nails and teeth appear longer, which used to terrify people. With the decomposition of the internal organs, a dark liquid may emerge from the nose and mouth, which they considered to be blood, and that the corpse feeds on the blood of the living. To ensure a suspected vampire would not rise again, they would drive a wooden stake through its heart or burn the body. This fear was further fueled by a belief in the magical effects of blood, as it was thought to hold life-giving powers that might cure illness. Because medical knowledge was scarce, people turned to these gruesome superstitions to explain the deaths happening around them. The height of vampire paranoia came in the 17th to the 19th centuries, and more than 100 mass graves of believed to be vampires have been discovered, containing bodies staked or restrained to prevent their return. In 1892, a famous story happened in a small town in Rhode Island. Tuberculosis spread in the town. The Brown family consisted of 5 members: the father, mother, and 3 children. The mother died first of tuberculosis, then the eldest daughter, Mercy, the middle daughter, remained fine for several years, until she suddenly fell ill, then died 2 months later, and the young son got sick. Some of the townspeople suspected that one of the family had turned into a vampire, and that she was the cause of the illness and death of the family members. After much persuasion, George Brown agreed to open the family cemetery. They found the mother and eldest daughter completely decomposed, but Mercy was as she had just been buried without any signs of decomposition. For them, this was sufficient evidence of her transformation. They burned Mercy's heart and made medicine from it for her younger brother. After the son took the medicine, expectations were high that he would recover, but he died shortly afterward. The son's death after taking the medicine raised more questions. It spread more terror in the hearts of the townspeople. After that, similar stories continued to happen in different parts of the world, which increased the terror and fear of vampires. In 1897, Bram Stoker published his famous novel Dracula. The story was inspired by multiple sources. The first was the story of Mercy Brown, which happened 5 years before that. The second source is Vlad III, or Vlad the Impaler. He was the ruler of Valahia, which was a region in what is now known as Romania. He was famous for his brutal killing methods, and was called the Impaler because he used the impalement to torture and get rid of his enemies. Vlad the Impaler was considered a symbol of terror throughout Europe, and became the main inspiration for Bram Stoker's story. There's also Elizabeth Bathory. She was called the Blood Countess, and she was of Hungarian origin. Elizabeth became obsessed with preserving her youth and believed that the blood of young women could keep her young, so she tortured and killed many and used to bathe in their blood and drink from it. Elizabeth's victims were said to be between 300 and 600 young girls. All those stories gathered to form the terrifying and intriguing world of Dracula, but far from the myths and stories. Vampires has a real presence among us now, but not in the way we know it. Porphyria is a rare disease that occurs when the body is unable to form hemoglobin in the blood. It is sometimes called vampire disease. Porphyria leads to several symptoms similar to vampirism, including thin and pale skin and extreme sensitivity to sunlight. The disease causes skin burning when exposed to direct sunlight, which makes those affected stay away from the sun. Hating garlic and staying away from it is another symptom of porphyria, because it contains sulfur, which increases their pain. Fear of mirrors is another symptom, as porphyria disfigures the skin, making patients avoid seeing themselves. It is surprising that some patients feel better after drinking blood, as drinking blood can compensate for severe hemoglobin deficiency. Some doctors even advised porphyria patients to drink animal blood to relieve their symptoms. This disease exists to this day, but in the past it was undiscovered. People believed that those afflicted with it were evil and unnatural creatures. Researchers also say that rabies was one of the culprits in cases of vampirism, as it leads to changes in behavior and violence. Patients with rabies develop a tendency to bite and have an aversion to strong lights, mirrors, and strong odors such as garlic. When they are exposed to these stimuli, they experience seizures in which their facial muscles writhe and spasm, their teeth appear, and their vocal cords contract, which changes their voice in a terrifying way. Sometimes they bleed from their mouth. The person suffering from rabies also suffers from insomnia, which makes him wander at night. And after his death, his blood remains liquid for a longer period of time, which made them believe in the past that he was a vampire. What is surprising is that until now there are many who claim to be vampires and disappear from sight. These people feed on the blood of their families or acquaintances. Whether this is due to disease, delusion, or a darker inspiration, we may never know. In fiction, Bram Stoker's Dracula remains the most iconic vampire character, a blend of truth and fiction that keeps us captivated by the vampire's mysterious allure. With stories blending history, superstition, and science, vampires continue to fascinate, remaining a powerful symbol of horror and fascination. Whether real or myth, the allure of vampires is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. The mystery and terror surrounding them, after all, seem to be eternal.